I was 26, I took a plane to San Diego. I stayed with a friend for a few days and booked a late flight home. My plane touched down at midnight. By the time I stumbled off and reached the ground transportation pickup, it was 12:30 a.m. The air was cold, heavy with that eerie stillness only a deserted airport can carry. I waved down a random taxi from the cluster of idling vehicles and rasped my home address to the driver. He grunted, "I'll take you for $30. A steal compared to Uber. He stepped out, offering to toss my bag in the trunk of his beaten yellow minivan, but I clutched it tighter, muttering, I'd keep it with me. He shrugged, hefted it onto the seat behind his to the left. I slid in diagonally from him, the vinyl creaking under me as he climbed back in, punched my address into his GPS, and peeled out. My apartment was a merciful half hour from the airport, and at that hour, the highway stretched empty before us, a black ribbon slicing through the night. We flew down it, the hum of the engine the only sound, until I caught his eyes in the rearview mirror. Twice. Sharp, unblinking stares that pinned me like a moth to a board. The second time, he broke the silence. "Where are you coming from?" His voice was gravelly, too intimate for the dark. "San Diego," I said. "Oh, very nice," he drawled, then pressed further. "What were you doing there?" "Visiting a friend," I replied, clipped. His lips curled. "Is your friend as pretty as you?" I forced a laugh, but it died in my throat. The words slithered over me, oily and wrong. Only his third sentence, and already the air felt tainted. From there, his questions twisted tighter, each one a probing claw. "What's a pretty girl like you doing traveling all by yourself?" I snapped back. "I just said I wasn't alone. I was with my friend." He smirked, unyielding. "Flying by yourself is traveling by yourself." "We can agree to disagree," I shot back, my sass a flimsy shield. He chuckled, low and throaty. "Just teasing you." He was maybe 45, grizzled, his presence looming larger with every mile. A lone girl in her 20s, trapped in his van. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this itch of unease, but it was sharper now, cutting deeper. We barreled down the highway. I glanced up as the familiar overpass by my exit loomed ahead, but he didn't slow. "This is my exit," I said, firm, as it blurred past us. Nothing. We sped by, the sign swallowed by darkness. Louder. "That was my exit." He mumbled an apology. "I'll catch the next one," but his tone was hollow. I craned to glimpse his GPS, but it tilted away, its glow a secret. The next exit was a mile off. I perched on the edge of my seat, pulse thudding in my ears. When it neared, I barked, "You need to get off here." No response, just a flick of his blinker and a slow merge. His eyes flashed to me in the mirror, a glint of something dark, annoyance, anger, before he spoke again, not a minute later. "You got a boyfriend?" "Yes," I snapped, instant. "He lives with me." Another glance, sharper now, like he smelled the lie. "What's his name?" "Yes," he asked that. I'd had enough. "I'm putting my headphones in," I said, jamming my dead AirPods into my ears, a mute barrier against his relentless digging. Asking my boyfriend's name? That wasn't flirtation. That was a hunter sizing up prey. I fired off texts to my family and friends, fingers trembling. Creepy taxi driver, shared my location. Help if it goes bad. We were in my town now, stopped at the first red light off the highway. I risked a look in the mirror. His eyes were locked on me, cold, predatory, boring into my skull. No words, but I didn't need them. My AirPods were silent, and the menace in his stare screamed louder than anything he could have said. The light turned green. He didn't move, still gawking. "Light's green," I choked out. He jolted forward grudgingly. No one replied but my older brother, awake 2 hours away. "Get out if you feel threatened," he texted. We rolled onto a main road, empty, desolate, nearing 1 a.m. on a weeknight. Another red light. His gaze hit me again, heavy and suffocating. Then I saw it. A police car, idling in an empty lot nearby. Instinct roared. I snatched my bag and backpack, yanked the van door open. He shouted, "What are you doing?" His hand slammed the power button, the door whirring to trap me, but I shoved it wide and leapt out, sprinting for the cop. He didn't chase, not for money, not for me. He just drove off, tires squealing, vanishing into the night. That alone iced my veins. I reached the police car, breathless. The officer rolled down his window, frowning as I blurted, "That taxi driver, he was giving me bad vibes. I bailed for my safety. Can you take me home?" He nodded. "Hop in the back." I did, a scared girl clutching her bag, and he drove me the 5 minutes home. I let myself in, didn't unpack, just brushed my teeth and collapsed into bed. But as my eyes fluttered shut, a knock rattled the front door. My heart seized. He had my address. What if it was him, back for his $30, or something worse? The knocks hammered on, paused, then resumed, relentless. I stayed locked in my room, the deadbolt my only savior, until they faded and exhaustion dragged me under. Next day, work was a blur. I had a later shift, thankfully, but while I was there, my neighbor George called. "Your dad was here earlier, trying to get in to drop something off, but he didn't have a key. Just checking it was him." My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "I haven't heard from him." George added, "He didn't leave anything. Just caught my eye through the window." I called Dad. He was at work, nowhere near my place. I spilled the taxi nightmare over the phone. "Come home for a few nights," he urged. I agreed, but I had to pack first. After work, 9 p.m., I got home. I finished last night's laundry, stuffed clothes and work gear into a bag. But something was wrong. I'm never jumpy alone. Yet that night, the air felt thick, alive. Every creak of the wood floor spiked my pulse, faint cracks like footsteps I couldn't trace. I told myself it was the taxi driver lingering in my head, but the dread gnawed deeper. I rushed to leave. Then a groan echoed from the hallway, from the spare bedroom. A voice low and guttural. "I wasn't gonna hurt you." An arm swung into view, flesh and shadow peeling from behind the wall. I didn't wait. Screamed, bolted, pounded on George's door. He and his wife spilled out, wide-eyed, as I begged for help. We called 911, waited for the cops. The apartment was small. They swept it fast. The back sliding door to the shared yard hung open, proof he'd fled. I had no record of the ride, no cab number, no plate, just a vague yellow minivan, and his face burned into my mind. Mid-40s, grizzled, eyes like traps. I gave them the route, the timing, praying some street camera caught him. I grabbed my bags, fled to my parents for a week. They begged me to stay longer, but I went back. Dad installed cameras on my doors, and I bought a taser, its cold weight now a bedside guardian. I've lived in 2 apartments since. Never used the taser. I shun taxis now, untraceable, unlike ride shares. Too many stories of fake drivers, abductors, and stolen vans. Was he real? Or something worse, prowling in that yellow coffin on wheels? I'll never know. But those knocks, that voice, they echo still. There's nothing out there. No houses, no signs of life, save for one dilapidated shack along the route. It's a rotting husk, abandoned for years, though I'd occasionally glimpsed a faint, flickering light inside as I passed. That night, a few minutes into my drive, on a rare straight stretch, my headlights caught something, a stark white shape glowing against the void among the trees. As I drew closer, it took form. A person, standing alone on the roadside, motionless, not hiding, not shifting, just frozen there, back to the woods, facing the road. It was a woman. She wore a white dress, or maybe a gown, thin and tattered, utterly unfit for the biting cold. I kept my brights on, wary, and the glare off her dress made her a blinding silhouette, her features lost to me. As I sped past, I thanked whatever fate spared me from her stepping into my path, forcing me to stop. but then doubt crept in. Should I have pulled over? Was she stranded, maybe even headed to Darren's party? I glanced into my rearview mirror, and my blood turned to ice. In the crimson glow of my taillights, she had pivoted, still rooted to that spot, her body now angled toward me, tracking my retreat. That wasn't a party guest. That was something else. I reached Darren's house by 8 p.m., parking among the dozen cars circling the driveway. Their home sat in a wide clearing, the forest looming like a silent predator around the neighborhood's scattered estates. The party unfolded as usual. Laughter, drinks, the ball drop in New York, then our own midnight countdown. Slowly, the guests trickled out. I lingered to help clean up, a habit of mine as one of Darren's closer friends. By the time I left, my car stood alone in the empty drive. I climbed in, started the engine, and a low tire pressure warning blinked to life. My car's an older model, no specifics on which tire or how bad. I brushed it off. Tires always act up when the cold snaps in after a warm spell. I'd make it home fine. But then I remembered her. That woman in white. Was she still out there lurking? There was a longer route home in the opposite direction, adding 20 minutes to the drive. Exhausted, wary of drunk drivers weaving through the night, I decided against it. I'd brave the back road again. That was my first mistake. Not even a mile out, something felt wrong. The car shuddered, and a grating screech, metal clawing asphalt, ripped through the silence. My vehicle lurched, then stopped dead. Shit, I hissed. This wasn't a flat tire. This was something worse. Against every instinct screaming at me to stay put, I stepped out, shutting off the engine. The headlights died, and darkness crashed over me like a wave, thick and suffocating, the forest pressing in from all sides. I fumbled for my phone, its feeble flashlight cutting through the void. What I saw stopped my heart. All 4 tires shredded, gaping, jagged wounds torn into the rubber as if some beast had raked them apart with claws. One tire I could explain, a puncture worsened by the rough road. But all 4? This was no accident. This was deliberate. Panic clawed at me. I stood there, helpless, stranded. No one would be out here, not this late, not on New Year's Eve. No tow truck, no signal. My phone was useless in these dead zones. I turned back to the car, but then the world went still. The faint breeze vanished. The bare branches ceased their whispering. Even the distant chirps of nocturnal creatures fell silent. It was a silence so absolute, so unnatural, it felt like the earth itself held its breath. Time seemed to hang, suspended until a twig snapped, sharp and brittle, somewhere in the trees. Something was moving. I killed my flashlight, plunging myself into blindness as leaves crunched underfoot. Slow, deliberate steps stalking through the woods. A deer? A squirrel? Number this was the silence of prey cowering before a hunter. And then I heard it. A voice, soft, feminine, floating from the pitch-black tree line not 15 feet away. I see you. My stomach plummeted. The air was sucked from my lungs. I couldn't scream, couldn't move. It wasn't angry or threatening, just calm, quiet, and that made it infinitely worse. Then again, closer. Can you see me? Terror jolted me awake. I flicked my flashlight on, aiming it straight ahead, and there she was, standing at the edge of the trees. The woman in white. Her gown hung in filthy tatters, streaked with dark, wet stains, blood, mud, or something worse. She was skeletal, her skin a ghastly pallor stretched tight over bones, gray hair cascading in greasy tangles past her elbows. But her face, God, her face, was a nightmare. Half her jaw was gone, a gaping ruin of flesh and bone, yet she grinned, a grotesque, lopsided leer that didn't belong on anything living. I stared, paralyzed, for a heartbeat too long before instinct screamed at me to run. I bolted down the road toward Darren's, abandoning the shack in the opposite direction. What if she came from there? Twigs snapped behind me, leaves rustled in a frenzied chase, her presence a shadow at my heels. Adrenaline burned through me, and I lost her in the dark, sprinting until I reached Darren's door. I pounded on it, gasping, pleading. His mother opened it, wide-eyed, and pulled me inside as I stammered out the horror I'd escaped. Darren and his father listened, grim-faced, and offered me the guest room while they called the police and a tow service. I accepted, desperate to forget, to sleep, and let the night die. But it wasn't over. At 3:14 a.m., a light tap jolted me awake, a pebble striking the second-story window. No blinds shielded me from the outside. I lay there, rigid, refusing to look, until that voice slithered through the glass again. "I see you." She'd followed me. She'd tracked me here, hurling rocks to summon me. I stayed rooted to the bed, eyes screwed shut, every muscle taut until dawn broke and she vanished with the light. In the morning, Darren's family and I searched the yard. Beneath the window where her voice had drifted up, his father found a rusty, blood-crusted knife, too large, too vicious to belong to their home. She'd slashed my tires with it, followed me to the party, waited in the shadows while we celebrated. Another guest later admitted they'd seen her, a figure in white pacing outside during the party, but dismissed it as nothing. The police searched the shack, finding no one, only the gutted corpses of animals strewn through the woods nearby, their innards spilling onto the frozen ground. She was never found. I still don't know how she tracked me so swiftly, or how, with half her face a mangled ruin, she spoke so clearly, her voice a whisper that haunts me still. This year, I'll go to Darren's party again. But I won't drive alone, and I'll take the long way around, praying she doesn't see me first.